Welcome to Deeply Rooted, a podcast by Planting Roots, a ministry for military women by military women.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Deeply Rooted podcast by Planting Roots. My name's Erin, and I'm really excited to be jumping into episode 3 of the So There I Was series with Andrea Plotner. Andrea is a former military wife. Her husband's retired now, but she's now a military mom and works at a military ministry facility in Colorado Springs. Andrea, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start by asking you the same question I'm going to ask everybody in this series, and that's the question, what is your story?
Okay, I was raised as an only child in California, went to public schools. We didn't really have a faith background, although I always had an interest in matters of faith. And during my elementary years, our neighbors took us to Sunday school. And then in high school, we had a Young Life at my high school. So midway through high school, I very decisively became a follower of Christ. And after that, I chose to go to a Christian college, which actually was not a building up place for my faith. So had a few years of wandering, and then God brought me back. Always through relationship. It was always through somebody inviting me to their home and really taking an interest in me and my life and my story. And then mutual friend, her dad was a part of a Christian ministry, military, and she met her husband and introduced me to my husband. It was a setup for sure. And so he was Army. So 21 years, we traveled all around the world, have 3 boys, and now we work at a Christian camp and conference center, retreat center that actually reaches out specifically to military personnel.
Wow, I really like that you said that it was always through relationship. I like that you made that point, because that's kind of the heart of this series is, you know, the power behind asking somebody what's your story and having a true and honest interest in the answer. Yes. Is so powerful and can make such a big difference on somebody's life.
Yes, and I like that you said true and honest interest, and not one that's simply for the sake of, some even evangelism, which is a very good thing, but just showing a genuine interest in the person and a love for them and a love for God, and hopefully those two intersect without me having to contrive that.
Yeah, it's just, again, so powerful, and it's the same way that I came to faith. It was through people just showing an interest in my life that I hadn't experienced other people do in the past. So definitely powerful, and for our listeners, like, again, just the power of asking the question, what's your story? Yes. It's such a broad question, but it can go such a long way. So next I want to ask you, another thing I forgot to mention in your bio, kind of intentionally, was that you are a writer and an editor for the Planting Roots publishing team. And one of the studies that I'm going through right now is your study on Galatians 5. And you'd think it's kind of interesting. It's just one chapter of Galatians. It's not the whole book of Galatians. But this study has been such an impact on my life. And I was hoping that you would talk about this study and kind of what led you to writing this study and just your heart behind it.
Right. So Planting Roots is a women's military ministry that has been pivotal in my life for the last decade, just about. We've been going almost a decade. And one of our theme verses was Galatians 5:1. It says, "For freedom that Christ has set us free." And so our theme verse for that year was out of Galatians 5. And when we began to look at how to study Galatians, we could see that Galatians 1-4 was truth, 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 truth. And then Galatians 5 was really truth in action. And both are important, but we just recognize that military women, whether they're working active duty in uniform, whether they're supporting their active duty family member, etc. I mean, our lives are very busy. I mean, the American woman is busy in general, but you just add that complexity of military life. And so we really wanted to get to the heart of it, besides which Galatians 5 is packed with so many different subjects. We really wanted not just knowledge, but we wanted practice. We don't want to just believe in Christ, we want to follow Christ. So that was the behind choosing just one chapter.
One of the lines that really stuck out to me in the introduction of this study, you say, "Oh, the sweetness, the freedom, the lightness, the joy, the power, and the peace that comes from walking with God, regardless of circumstances. This same sweetness has sustained me through military training cycles, deployments, losses, griefs, and sorrows. I can't imagine life without the hope of Christ, but I really can't imagine military life without the hope of Christ." And just right off the bat, that sentence resonated with me deeply. Not only, obviously, the part about not imagining military life without the hope of Christ. Like I ask myself every day how people go through this world without hope and joy that God offers us. And then the other word that really resonated with me is the word lightness. And you say the lightness that comes from walking with God. And that is a word that I hadn't found before, but it exactly describes what it feels like when you're walking with Christ daily and in His Word and abiding by the Holy Spirit. Like whatever's going on in life, even if things are physically really heavy on you, and if you're carrying a lot and there's so much hard stuff going on, heavy stuff going on, it offers you this lightness, this unexplainable lightness, and that's just something that really stood out to me in that first introduction. Then it also links to the verse in Matthew 11 that just talks about, "For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Like when you're yoked with the Lord, when you're walking with Him, He offers that lightness. So that's just one thing that stood out to me in this study. And again, it's just one chapter, but it is so powerful. I'm not all the way through it yet, but I'm excited to get all the way through it because it's already just the first verse of Galatians 5 has just done wonders on my life already. So
That's so exciting.
So last week, Corey and I talked about the idea of quote-unquote full-time ministry. And what we kind of talked about is that there's different things that come to mind when someone says the words like full-time ministry. Me as a active duty woman right now, it's hard to feel like I'm doing full-time ministry because I'm doing full-time military. But what we talked about is that the idea of full-time ministry, everyone should be doing full-time ministry. Like if our hearts are after God and that's what we've set our sights on, then we are doing full-time ministry and we have availability wherever we're at to lead people to Christ. But as someone who is in full-time ministry, as what the world would think of as full-time ministry, working at the retreat center full-time, I just wanted to ask you to share a bit about what that's been like and just the heaviness and the weight that does bring. It is a hard full-time job, but I was just wondering if you would share on that a little bit.
Yes. So another phrase you could use to describe full-time ministry is vocational ministry, because obviously we are all full-time believers in Christ. And this gets to actually something that I've really been meditating on lately. And it's the verse that says, "Now these three remain, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love." And no matter what you're doing, it's the gist of Galatians. So in Galatians, they're like, okay, let us just get circumcised, and then we'll check the block, and then, boom, we'll have met that faith requirement. But it actually says, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. And so when we have that abiding love of Christ, so Christ in us, producing the fruit of love, we carry that wherever we go. And that's what makes all of life full-time ministry, because we carry that everywhere. And love is a noun, but it's also a verb, and so important. And so then we start to think, how does love intersect absolutely everything we do? So love can intersect the number of hours that we spend in front of screens, whether at work or at play. Love can intersect our idea of commerce. Love can intersect our idea of identity, sexuality, all those types of things. And so none of that is unique, I would say, to full-time ministry, vocational ministry versus avocational ministry, right? However, in this setting, people come looking specifically for spiritual encouragement. So in the workplace, let's say, somebody might not come to you every moment of every day expecting kind of spiritual encouragement. So there is a sense in which it's a real privilege because it keeps you on your toes. And I had a friend who was also in vocational ministry said, you can't serve dinner from an empty pot. So it's sort of the reward of, or the double blessing of being the teacher, that if you're not filled up, you have nothing to pour out and to feed others with. And so in that sense, it is a privilege because it does keep you sharp and alert.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And like you kind of mentioned there, I don't know that I feel that pressure every day, which can be a good thing, but also, like you're saying, it's not as good of a sense of accountability. Like I don't go to work and think like, okay, like I guess I want to have a defense for my faith, but I don't necessarily have I'm not ready for that every day, which I want to be. I want to be. Yeah. I want to treat it as full-time ministry, and I want to have that, that accountability and that motivation to be on my toes.
Yeah, so I think, when we look at the first and greatest commandment, which is to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then the second is like it, to love our neighbors as ourselves, we can take that love into every interaction that we have, and people will notice a difference. Mm-hmm. And again, we don't have to contrive it. If we're abiding in Christ, we will bear the fruit of Christ. It's a promise of Scripture. We don't have to contrive those interactions, although we may need to exercise, the other fruit of self-control. But I think just that love, we carry the light and the lightness into those places we go, and we look at situations differently. So then we look at faith, hope, and love. Hope is so active because at any moment you can ask yourself, all right, in this moment, what am I putting my hope in? And another way to say that is, what am I putting my trust in? And that is whole life discipleship right there. And again, that is more than just, I've gone to church or I've asked Christ to be my Savior. That is whole life discipleship, and I think that is what we're all called to. And again, the phrase that's really been in my mind all in this season is that you've heard the phrase truth in action. Mm-hmm. I think truth that's not in action is not actually truth. And the Bible says that in a bunch of different ways, but I was trying to really think of a way to sum that up. But when you put faith, hope, and love together, that is action. Yeah. And it starts with the way we think and the way we trust and the way we view the world and view other people.
Well, and it is crazy, too, that those three things, faith, hope, and love, they go so far in the military atmosphere, even if you're not quoting verses from the Bible, or if you're not, doing it in a Christian way even. It's crazy. The simple act of, not complaining when I'm underway in the middle of the ocean. Huge. And I look weird when I'm not complaining, or when I'm not swearing. Those are just such simple ways, and they don't even take that much intentionality, which in a sense is sad, but it also is encouraging. Like God has given us easy ways to look different in this world and to be a witness to this world. And so it's crazy, but also simple in ways like that, I guess.
And again, they are wonderful things to practice and be intentional about, but I have also found the more I abide in Christ, the more I am saturated in Christ and in His Word and in prayer, those things just manifest naturally.
Yes. I found the same thing. Again, I'm on a Coast Guard cutter, so we'll go out in the middle of the ocean, right? And sometimes I'll have watch up on the bridge, so I'll be driving the boat in the middle of the night. And when I've been in the Word and when I've been, walking closely with the Lord, it's evident because it flows out. I find myself, because again, it's the middle of the night, so your brain's just trying to stay awake because you're talking with the other people on the bridge, and I find myself just there's a flash of lightning, and I'm verses just flow out, but not quoting verses, but just it just comes out of me naturally. It's not something I have to force. But
the Word really is living and active, sharper than any double-edged sword, able to pierce through our bones and marrow and joints. And when we've experienced that, the, we've experienced that three-dimensional faith that is sustaining and that does offer a wonderful counterpoint to the world's options. But when we're not abiding like that, the world's options, I mean, it literally, the world is the water in which we swim, and faith is a means of swimming upstream. And it does require, as you said, intentionality or practice. And if you think about it, really, we practice machinery all day long. We practice screens all day long. We practice buying and selling and wanting and acquiring all day long. We really, if our faith is not embodied, it's not enough to withstand the pressures of the world.
And then something else that I really love about this study is that you encourage people to try to memorize Galatians 5. And I mean, it seems so daunting. Like at first, you're like, oh, memorize a whole chapter of the Bible, but also, like we're talking about, when you are going back to it every day, when you have it in your mind, like I found it easier than I expected it to be. And again, just how those simple verses that I have memorized, it's not a whole chapter yet, and it's not a whole book or anything, but still, like, I find myself meditating and going back to those verses every day, and it equips me to be a better Christian, to be more like God.
Yes, the wonderful thing about memorizing scripture is that it becomes portable nutrition. Just the same way you would throw a peanut butter pack or a bar in your bag, it is portable spiritual nutrition that you can carry with you anywhere, and no one can take that away. I mean, no one can take that away, and that is so powerful in of itself. It takes up no space, minus the space in our souls, and yet it is nourishment for this life and the one to come. So, and here's another, I think, tip or hack that makes memorizing Galatians 5 so easy. It really covers 5 very dramatic themes. So you look toward the end, like, don't do these things, rage, malice, deceit, impurity, so there's just a whole category of like kind of some of those like respectable sins that, are very convicting. And then the very end, be this, be filled with Christ and, look to the values of his kingdom, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control, because against these things there is no evil. So I think it becomes pretty easy to memorize because they're just 4 like super useful, practical, distinct topics. Do this, not that, eat this, not that, be this, not that.
Right. And I think when you study a verse or study a chapter even, and when you actually understand it, it becomes so much easier to memorize. I remember being younger at church and just like trying to like brute force memorize something, and it never worked because I wasn't actually like, listening to what it was saying.
Yes, right. They're just words.
They were just words, yeah. And it became more of like a school assignment versus something I wanted to do to feed my soul, like you're talking about. Yeah. And then another idea in this study, I mean, the whole book of Galatians is just about freedom from the law and just explaining to the Galatian church that it's not a check the box. Like, you're not just trying to abide by this list of rules in order to attain eternal life. Like, he really wants you to walk with the Spirit and understand the gift that was the grace of Jesus dying on the cross. And so, in Galatians 5, it talks about the idea of circumcision. And circumcision isn't necessarily a topic that is like brought up that much today.
Really translate much today. Yeah.
Right, but we do have like so many other, I guess, expectations that society has put on our lives that kind of mimic the idea of feeling the need to be circumcised. And one of which for me, when I thought of that idea and like what I feel like bound to these days is just the conflict between what the world says of you can have it all, you can be a super strong, like career-minded woman, and then you can also have a great family. And like I feel the need to like go out and strive and be the best I can and like prove my worth in the work world. And that's kind of like when I think of like what I am bound to as like ideas that I have to do, that's how I feel. And so I guess what would you say to me as advice on that topic? Well, because I think it's something that a lot of other, especially younger women these days, my generation really struggles with, because we want to honor God in it all, but it's something that's complicated.
Yeah, and many people in your generation particularly have been educated and prepared for a career field. I mean, it's just
Mhm.
kind of, again, that water in which we swim, the times in which we live.
Right.
Um, I, I myself had a master's degree before I got married, even. Um, yeah, so maybe I'll just speak to you experientially. I could speak from scripture, but we're empty nesters for the first time this year, so I've gone back to work full time.
Hmm.
It's so hard. Like, it's so hard um, to find a work-life balance. So if I work all day, I'm like a zombie at the end of the day. Um, so like my responsibility levels are much higher. So when I get home, like just in our relationship together, we both have kind of higher responsibility jobs, and so my relationship with my husband, like takes a lot more set asideness. And anyway, so my heart goes out to all those who've sort of been in this paradigm the whole time. And I will say there were seasons where having kids at home was really a full-time job.
Hmm.
When they were young, particularly, there was, just watching little people and not getting enough sleep, and really having to wanting to be loving and patient all day long was as hard as anything we've ever done. And there was a season we were homeschooling because the school situation on our military installation didn't fit our family. So that was really like a full-time job. And in each of those seasons, it it's almost impossible to do it all. And so maybe I'll sum it up with a homeschooling phrase that might help to encourage you. It was a funny little joke like, okay, I have to cook, I have to clean, and I have to do schoolwork in a day, let's say. So, or, right now I have to cook, I have to clean, and I have to go to work and do my job. Like, pick two of three. So if the house is clean and there's dinner, like nothing got done at work. Or if things got done at work and you've got dinner, then the house is trashed. So it's just sort of a little truism that I found that it, it's a it's it's a lot to balance all of life. It just is. And so
Hmm.
um, I guess finding your sweet spot, I think, is really important. That comes to listening to the shepherd's voice and really discerning. So this is an important topic. There are so many voices in our world today. They come in the workplace, they come through our screens, they come through advertising. I mean, just so many voices. And the mark of a Christian, a mark of a disciple, is that they are a sheep following the shepherd. They know the shepherd's voice. So
Hmm.
the scriptural biblical advice I would give you is know the shepherd's voice and let that be the one that speaks louder than all the others. And I think that's at the very heart of warfare too, spiritual warfare. At the heart of spiritual warfare is knowing and heeding the shepherd's voice, and that does require time spent with the shepherd.
Wow, yeah, that's a really good answer, and it goes back to Matthew 11, just being yoked with the Lord and
Yes.
knowing the Father. And I think where I get caught up most of the time is when I let the influence of, I mean, my supervisors at work or other people in that workforce speak louder than God, and when I give them more authority in my life than
That's
the
it.
Lord.
Yes. And I mean, and especially so, not even just American culture, but American military culture. I mean, they're working to up the statistical number of women, not only in the military, but in military leadership. And so you actually are in a unique time in history where the marketing is directed towards you. So even more important to know the shepherd's voice and to heed his voice for your life.
Absolutely, and I think that'll resonate deeply with a lot of our listeners too, because like I said, it's something. I mean, like you just said, the marketing is right towards us right now,
Yes,
and it's
it is.
hard to fight back against it. And sometimes we don't want to fight against it. That's not the goal either. It's just that we were trying to navigate and figure out what God's plan is for our lives. So
Yes,
thank you for
exactly.
that answer. And then the last thing I want to ask you about is this new Planting Roots study that is, I think, coming out the day that we're recording this, actually the 15th. So we are really, I'm really excited about it. It's called
Yeah.
Strength to Thrive in Military Life, and I was just wondering if you'd give our listeners just a summary what the heart of that new study is.
Yeah. So the phrase planting roots comes out of the theme verse Jeremiah 17:7 and 8, which talks about the person who puts their trust in the Lord, who is planted in the Lord, that person will thrive, even when seasons of fear come, of scarcity, or when drought comes or when heat comes. And I've had plenty of those seasons in my own life, and am currently in the midst of one. And there, the promises of God are real. So if you were planted in Christ, the heat, the adversity, and adversity is one of the 7 topics in that study, will not touch you in the way that they would touch you without Christ. Because again, it comes back to that faith, hope, and love. We have a hope that exceeds this world. It goes into eternity. And so that study is meant to really shift our perspective to what it looks like to be planted in and to put our trust in and to thrive in Christ. So super excited. And one of the other 7 topics, which I think is so relevant today, is community. So if you look at the average American, and Christians are not exempt from this, statistics spend at least 7 hours a day in front of screens. And so that's really means, dinner for 2 is me and my screen. And so this idea of community bumps up directly against what I'll call machinery, let's say, right? Mm-hmm. Community bumps up directly against machinery, and machinery is just part of the, we're on machinery right now. I mean, it is a tool that we can use for good, right? But it really bumps up directly against community. So this idea that we are really seen and heard and known and loved in community, that we are healed in community, we find healing in community, we find hope in community, we find encouragement in community, and we even find provision in community. We see a verse in Acts where believers, there was great material scarcity there, and they were encouraging one another. And I think another dynamic we face is that we don't have material scarcity currently in America, but like the rates of loneliness, the study just came out from the Department of Defense this year, the rates of loneliness among American military women is around 71%. So although we have material abundance, we have relational scarcity. And I really do think that when it says to be the church, that's Christ in me, but then that is Christ in us. And it has the power to heal, to transform, to save. So one of the 7 topics in that study that I think we can really do a deep dive in is, what does it look like to practice community in our military settings?
Wow. Yeah, those statistics are crazy.
Sobering, yes.
And me and my husband, we chose to come down to Virginia, where we're stationed now, solely based on the amount of people that are in the Norfolk area.
Yeah.
And although like we could have chased after the jobs that looked prettier and more fun and exciting, like have never regretted my decision, our decision to move here because of community, because that's my rock. That's how I get through everything, is through community, and that's what brings me closer to the Lord the most.
So community really should be the bread and butter for the Christian. And there's a little pun worked in there because just the whole idea of breaking bread together. The easiest way to engage in community is just to eat and drink together. Like, we make it so hard. But how did Jesus meet with unbelievers? He ate and drank with them. How did Jesus meet with believers? He ate and drank with them. How do we meet with believers? We can eat and drink, share meals, and then we can gather in church settings and have communion together. I mean, we make it so hard. And again, so contrived when just gathering for bread and butter is as simple as it needs to be. And yes, we have to work around the whole gluten-free thing nowadays, but we don't have to do like entertaining Martha Stewart style, really just get together, order Domino's, have a salad, make coffee, have tea, whatever. It has the power to transform and to heal and to bless and to multiply.
For sure. Yeah, and I think KG and I talked about this in the first episode, but like you said, technology is important for doing things like this and for, bridging a gap between distances that military life brings. But also, I mean, God says love your neighbor for a reason. I mean, there's so many people close by. like that have the power, like you said, to come into our homes, for us to go into their homes. Like that's where like true, community where you're at is so important too.
Yes, and I think being a neighbor starts in your home, and even then we have to resist just sort of coexisting with our screens, but extends beyond there. Wow, what an impact we can have in one another's lives when we do meet face to face and do life together.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andrea, for joining me today. Do you have any last thoughts for our audience?
Maybe just the last quote, and it's not even a Bible verse, but maybe it's based on biblical principles of trust, and maybe it'll just help all those Bible verses stick. But I had friends, and she almost died in labor, and so I asked her husband, "Were you scared?" And he said, "No, I knew it would be fine, and even if it wasn't fine, it would be fine because that's just the way God is." And to me, that's a picture not only of trust, but what it looks like to thrive amid heat and adversity. So it'll be fine. Even if it's not fine, it'll be fine because that's just the way God is. And that's as we abide in Christ.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And if you are interested in this new study, you can find it linked down below. I'll link the study in the description in the show notes. And as always, you can check out the Planting Roots website or the Planting Roots Instagram page for all the details. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Erin. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on Deeply Rooted, a podcast by Planting Roots, a ministry for military women by military women. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us on all social media platforms, or drop over to our website, www.plantingroots.net, to sign up for our Planting Roots newsletter. You don't want to miss the inspirational and practical resources developed with you in mind.